welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Ebony, and if you're not, then welcome back. I am doing a sit-down video today, and I'm going to mainly discuss my decisions about not having OB care for this pregnancy. This is baby number 4 for me, and I'm going to discuss my previous births and experiences with OB care, and going forward what I want to do this pregnancy and how I want to give birth this pregnancy. So I hope you enjoy. So for my first birth, I was only 16. I had obviously fallen pregnant very young, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. I'll kind of just go through the beginning of my labour and things that happened throughout Ruby's birth. So I went into labour early that morning. Well, 2 days prior to having her, I actually went into labour. So I went into labour on the 10th of April, and I was just having tightenings in my back, in my stomach. I'm pretty sure I'd lost some of my mucus plug, and yeah, so I just was at home. I think it might have been a weekend because everyone was home, although in saying that, my mum had cancer at the time, so she was home all the time, obviously. So with her birth, we went to the hospital probably, I don't know, 11 o'clock or around lunchtime. I mean, it's 10 years ago now, so it's not going to be, I can't remember everything. It's not going to be in great detail. And we obviously arrived at the labour and delivery ward, and they checked me, confirmed that I had started dilating, and I think because I was so young they were probably more willing to keep me. And I remember quite clearly the midwife saying to me, because I was so young and I was so healthy and so fit, it would likely just be like a 6-hour labour, and she could just see me having my baby that day. And yeah, little did she know it was going to be a very long 29-hour labour. So yeah, we got admitted basically straight away. I had a lot of support people with me. I had my mum, I had my best friend, and I had my twin sister. And so we obviously just went back to the room. I think at this point I wasn't really in too much pain. It wasn't until later on in that day that I started experiencing more pain, and I think I was given pethidine shots and things like that to try and sleep. And I was having the gas as well, but yeah, all of that type of stuff just kind of makes me sick, and I was hallucinating and everything. It was not good. But yeah, I went to sleep, everyone left, and then the next day, like obviously I was still in labour. The doctor came in and wanted to break my waters. This was probably around like I don't know, 10 a.m, so I'd been in labour for over 24 hours now. And he broke my waters, and then things really got moving. I got given the remifentanil, which is like a little morphine drip, and you press every time you have a contraction and it takes the pain away, or is supposed to, which just again made me sick. And yeah, so I gave birth to Ruby at 1 o'clock or just after 1 o'clock, I think, and then ended up having a 3C tear and needed surgery to fix that. So I didn't actually really get to see her until like 6 o'clock that night. So it was like a good 5 hours that I was away from her, and thankfully my twin sister was just keeping her company and holding her the whole time. But yeah, so it was a pretty traumatic experience, to be honest, and I even find it hard to talk about it even though it has been 10 years. And yeah, so that was her birth. I had lots of trouble going forward with like my bowel issues. Like I was constipated for like the first 12 months of her life because I had such a significant tear. It had like partly gone into my anus. I know that is way too much information for a lot of people, but this is the reality of childbirth. And yeah, so I stayed in the hospital for a few nights, got sent home, and things were okay after that. And then I got pregnant again about 2 and a bit years later. So I was 18 when I fell pregnant, and then I was 19 by the time it was time to give birth. So throughout that pregnancy I had mainly just OB care. I had basically no midwife interaction, which was very different to Ruby's, where I had mainly just midwives. I had some doctors because I have had previous heart surgery, and yeah, I mainly just saw doctors. And at this point I was still really young. I was only 18. I didn't question what the doctors were saying. I just went along with whatever they recommended because I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. And so when I got to about 36 weeks, it was recommended to me that I have an elective C-section at 38 weeks to avoid any further damage to yeah, my vagina and anus area. But I hadn't had any issues or major issues apart from the constipation. And looking back on that, I'm pretty, like, I still am pretty angry about that, because the doctor didn't tell me, oh, here are the risks for having a C-section, here are the risks for having a VBAC. It was just kind of like, oh, like, you had a pretty significant tear, we want to avoid any further damage, so here's the papers for an elective C-section and you should sign them. And that was pretty much it, and I just, yeah, didn't question it because I was so young. So I went and had him at 38 weeks, and to be honest, that was probably the nicer experience out of my 2 C-sections. The recovery was fine. I did go into a little bit of shock afterwards, and just felt nauseous and was really shaky and stuff, but it was nothing compared to my next C-section. I was 21, I believe, when I fell pregnant with my 3rd baby. Maybe I was older. Maybe I might have been 22. Did not want to have another C-section. I just didn't want that recovery time. I really wanted to just have a vaginal birth. Yeah, no downtime again, because I was in the hospital for like 4 days after Archer's birth, and I just already having 2 children at home, like I just wanted to avoid it. But Eden had other plans. She was breech basically throughout my whole pregnancy, and again I saw mainly doctors, and I had a really horrible few experiences. I had what they thought was a subchronic hemorrhage, which is basically an internal bleed close to my placenta. I had a doctor tell me that. I was by myself, and I started crying, and she told me to stop crying, and that it was fine. I mean, looking back on that, that's pretty disgusting. Like, you don't tell someone to stop crying when they've just been given some not nice news about their pregnancy. And she didn't even explain anything. She didn't tell me how big it was. She didn't tell me the risks of it. She didn't tell me like that it could absorb. She didn't tell me anything. So here I am freaking out, thinking, oh my god, like my placenta's going to detach, or I'm going to continue bleeding, or you know things that happen from that. Your baby can die from that. So yeah, I should not have Googled, but I did. And I was just in tears after that appointment. So I had a few of those experiences throughout Eden's pregnancy. And I think it's when I really started to question the hospital system and how not like patient-centered or women-centered that they are. And I think those experiences just have, I don't know, they've changed me a lot. And for those of you who don't know, I now have been diagnosed with PTSD. I don't know if that's because of those experiences or because of my heart surgery at such a young age. But yeah, I got diagnosed with that this year. Yeah, so I mean that explains a lot as to why I feel the way I do towards the hospital as well. Yeah, so basically I really wanted to have a VBAC with Eden. She did not turn. I did absolutely everything. I did spinning babies exercises. I did moxibustion, which is like this burning thing against your big toe or your little toe, whatever it was. I did acupuncture. I tried not to slouch. I did, lots and lots of things, but she just would not turn. I begged the hospital for an ECV, which is where they manually turn the baby. But because I'd had one previous C-section, they were very hesitant to do that, and I was told multiple times, you're not going to find a doctor who's supportive to do that. So yeah, I just hoped for the best. I really didn't want to book in an elective C-section or anything. I got to like 38 weeks, my 38-week appointment. I had a doctor basically just say to me, like, let's just book one in. Here's the papers, you should sign them. And I did, but I signed them for after I was 40 weeks. So I was still hopeful that she would turn, and that, I would get my vaginal birth. And I knew that I wouldn't make it to 40 weeks. I'd never made it to 40 weeks in a pregnancy before. So I was 39 weeks exactly when I went into labour. And I'd been labouring for a while, like early labour signs. Lost again some mucus plug and things like that. And so I'd been labouring like over a day. And it wasn't until I went to bed the night before and I really couldn't sleep, so I called the hospital at about 5 AM and they were like, right, we need to come in straight away. Like, if your baby's breech and you've had a previous C-section, like, you need to get here right now because there are obviously risks. But I was in no rush. Like, I was still in early labour. I knew I was still in early labour. So I got up and went about my day as normal and dropped off the kids at daycare and things like that, and my eldest at school. And yeah, we went to the hospital and I called Shane home from work and we went to the hospital. And when I got there, it was probably like 10 AM. They did an internal examination and I was 3 centimetres dilated, and they confirmed that she was still breech. And so at 1 o'clock I went in and had a C-section. And this time my experience was far worse than what my first one had been. The C-section itself went smoothly, like everything went smoothly. But afterwards I was in a world of pain. The spinal wore off basically the minute I got out of recovery, and I felt like my incision was on fire. I was certain that they had like left something inside of me, or that I had, that something was wrong. And I remember asking for a face washer to cool my scar down or like give me something. I was like I was at the point where I was throwing up. I was in that much pain, and as you can imagine, after having major abdominal surgery, throwing up is extremely painful. I was begging for them to bring the anaesthetist back and re-put in my spinal block. I was in that much pain. So he ended up coming back and he gave me morphine through a drip, which helped, but then made me even sicker. So then I needed anti-nausea medication, and it was just a whole mess. So it was a very, very long road to recovery for me. It was much more harder than my first one. I don't know if that's because there's already scar tissue there, or because, yeah, it was just a different experience. But for me personally, like, I really didn't feel like myself for a long time. I couldn't stand up straight for a long time. I couldn't do things unassisted for a long time. It probably wasn't until about 6 weeks that I felt more like myself, but I was in pain for a really long time. And again, that is something that I want to avoid this time, and I want to avoid, yeah, feeling like I'm on fire after a bloody surgery. So yeah, I really want to go into this pregnancy in the mindset that I am having a vaginal birth. This baby is going to be head down, fingers crossed. But now I'm kind of start talking about this pregnancy and what I've done so far. So falling pregnant this time, I knew that I wanted to have a VBAC. I've known that I wanted to have a VBAC before even Eden was born, you know, after my first C-section. And obviously there's more risks this time, given the fact that I've had 2 C-sections now. There's a higher chance of uterine rupture and other complications, which I'm completely aware of, but they're actually, while they are can be quite catastrophic in terms of the outcomes for the mother and baby, they are also very rare. I've read up a whole ton, I've informed myself a whole ton, and it's like 1.6% of women after having a VBAC will have a uterine rupture. After having a C-section, sorry, will have uterine rupture when they're aiming for a VBAC. And for me, the fact that it's like 98.4% that won't happen, I mean, that's pretty good statistics to me when you look at it that way. And women do have VBACs every single day. I'm a part of the VBAC Australia group on Facebook, and there are so many success stories, and for me, I just think the pros far outweigh the cons. And you know, I want to give birth on my terms. I want to, you know, not feel forced into decisions and be told this is what's right for my body and my baby. I want to have a birth that I don't feel traumatized from, and I know that so many women do. I think I read the other day that 1 in 3 women would describe their birth as traumatic, and for me that's just disgusting. Like, I think Australia, and I know globally, need to have a look at the way that we assist women in birth, because there are just far too many interventions. And so yeah, going forward, or with this pregnancy, I've only seen a doctor once, or an OB once, and that was for my initial appointment at the hospital, and I was about 14 weeks, or maybe I was more like 12 weeks. And yeah, I told her that I want to have a VBAC. She told me that there are huge risks and all of the stuff that they love to tell you, and ultimately that they wouldn't recommend me having a VBAC, but the hospital have to support my decision regardless. So if I turn up in labour and I want to continue to labour, then that is my decision, and they have to support me in that. So yeah, I've only seen that one doctor, and something really nice actually came out of that appointment. She apologised to me for the experiences that I've had, for, you know, not feeling like I've been told the risks, and not feeling like I've been informed and feeling forced into decisions that I really didn't want to make, and not feeling supported by the hospital. So that was really nice and made me cry. But yeah, I said to her, do I get a choice in my mode of care? Like I would like to have a choice. And she said to me, yeah, like we would probably recommend the OB clinic because you've had 2 C-sections. And I just said to her, yeah, obviously my experiences, I want to try and avoid OBs, to be honest, and I would like more midwife care, and I find that midwives are often more supportive of VBACs. So she agreed to that. She didn't agree to my first choice, which was the midwife group practice program. I don't really know why. She said spots are limited and stuff, and she put that as number 2. But I got referred into what's called the satellite clinic through my hospital, where I see a midwife outside of the hospital in like my local area, which is fine by me because honestly, the less I have to go to the hospital, the better, to be honest. And I think that one way in achieving a VBAC is putting supportive people around you and having less intervention. I honestly believe that, and I know that there are statistics that demonstrate that having a supportive group of people involving, you know, midwives and doulas and family or whatever, it makes your chances of having VBAC so much more. So it's exactly what I'm doing. And yeah, avoiding the hospital kind of at all costs. The OB did say to me that I would need counselling at 34 weeks to go through the risks of having a VBAC versus having another C-section. And that's the thing, like there are huge risks with having repeat C-section after repeat C-section. You can have a uterine tear in a C-section. You can have a postpartum hemorrhage or a hemorrhage on the operating table. Like there are huge risks with repeat C-sections also that I think some women probably don't get informed about. And I think that you need to weigh both of those up. And for me, I have, and having another C-section just is not what I want to do. So anyway, I've got my next midwife appointment on the 1st of September, so I'll be like 20 weeks I think by then, and for me that's fine, only having seen an OB once and a midwife once for half of my pregnancy basically. Like the less intervention for me the better. And I definitely think that I'll make another separate video in like tips that I would give if you're wanting to have a VBAC. Not that I've had one yet, but yeah, I think I've just worked out a lot more how to make sure I have the right support people around me to try and achieve that this time, and I'm so much more informed. So I think I will do that in a separate video. But yeah, that's basically all of it. Another thing that I did want to touch on was just other experiences that I've had around like consent, and obviously I didn't feel like I had been given enough information to make informed decisions around having C-sections and yeah, giving my consent to have C-sections and things like that. Like ultimately I did in the end, but yeah, it was kind of really pushed and forced upon me. And other things that are, you know, that really have impacted the way that I see OBs and I see hospitals. You know, I've had midwives or doctors come up and say, I'm going to check you now. Like they don't even ask you, can I give you an internal examination? They just say what they're going to do, and that is not consent to me. That is just saying what you're going to do about to someone's body. And I just think that is a prime example of like how wrong the system is currently. Like, we need to be asking mothers what they want, and I just think that if we did, we'd have a lot less traumatized mothers who've given birth. So I know that's probably not really related to the rest of the stuff that I just talked about, but I just think that's another reason like why I want to avoid the hospital. And yeah, I'm going to turn up into labour and in labour to the hospital this time, and I'm going to turn up probably in established labour, even though they wouldn't recommend that because they like to monitor you the whole time. But yeah, I think the less time that I spend at the hospital, the better, and because then that way you're not put on this strict time frame that they have. They want you to have your baby within 24 hours, or, you know, you're not dilating enough, we better go for a C-section. So yeah, I'm going to turn up in established labour, hopefully not too long before I need to start pushing, and that way I know that I will have a far greater chance of success in having my VBAC this time. So fingers crossed that this baby goes head down and that things go smoothly and as planned. Obviously, if something is extremely wrong, or you know, I have to have a C-section for another reason, I will. But I just want to go into this you know, pregnancy thinking that I'm going to achieve a VBAC, because I think that having that mindset is probably going to help get there. But yeah, that's kind of all I think I wanted to talk about, and you know, I hope this maybe helps someone else who's had similar experiences, or who's tossing up between having a C-section or a VBAC, or you know, a vaginal birth. So I hope you enjoyed that video, or this video, and I hope that it kind of sheds light on, you know, my decisions not to really engage with OBs this time and the hospital as much, and things that I'm going to do to try and, yeah, hopefully have a successful VBAC.